How's it going, everybody? This is Ask Me Anything About Politics. So, if you've got any questions about politics, just let me know in the chat, and I will do my best to give you a great answer. I know that politics can be really intimidating when you're first trying to learn about it. I know that it can sometimes feel like trying to learn a new language. So, this is what the show is for you to ask all those questions that you don't feel comfortable asking in other places. Like maybe you live in a place where you can't ask your questions because people would think that you were a MAGA person, or people would think that you were a libtard cuck person. Now, there's no judgments here, regardless of what your question is, regardless of if you are a Republican or a Democrat. You can ask me anything that you like, and you will get a good faith answer so long as you ask your question in good faith. Sometimes I get a little spicy with people in the comments if they get a little spicy at me, but I try my best just to not do that and to not get into fights with people. Divinity says, "Do you think George Washington was right to warn us about creating political parties?" I think that some of the rhetoric around political parties, I think, is a little hyperbolic. I do believe that there are. I think that he was on point with some of it, and yeah, I think that a lot of the issues that people have with political parties is sometimes misdirected. But yeah, they're not great. Thank you for your question, Divinity. Thank you for being here. Donald Trump 420 again. Who are you? What are you doing? I I am not sure what your vibe is. Kitty Cocktail says, "Do you think there's a chance we could get back to neutral, or the extremes too far?" Kitty Cocktail. I don't know if I want to go back to neutral. Like, what do you? How would you describe neutral? Because the way I would describe neutral is even a more normal Republican Party and a normal Democratic Party are still just kind of like allowing the system to kind of like move as it was, where the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, and not a lot is happening to solve all these massive problems that we have. Um, I also disagree with the idea, Kitty Cocktail, that both parties are extreme right now, where the Republican Party's extreme is building concentration camps and ignoring the rule of law, and the Democrats' extreme is saying that everybody deserves health care. Let's see here. Old Crick says, "Are you a cop?" No, I am not. I behave like a cop. That's news to me. Kitty Cocktail says, "At this point, I'm not even sure there is a neutral at this point. In my opinion, we need a third." I'm guessing you were going to say party. I don't understand the desire for a third party. I find the Democratic Party to be perfectly acceptable and also changeable because we have primaries. So I don't understand what the value is of a third party. And a lot of times when I ask people what their policy preferences are that want a third party, it is identical to the Democrats' platform. Alrighty, let's see here. Party sources just saw that Smithsonian removed Trump from the impeachment exhibit. Yeah, that should be wildly concerning to everybody that the Ministry of Truth is in there changing history and history books and museum exhibits because they don't want to hurt the president's feelings. Like, that's fucking completely bananas. Alrighty, Brennan C23 says the binary two-party system blocks progress. I completely disagree with that, Brennan. OS says talk about the Bulgarian opposition situation. That is not my specialty. I don't really have enough, what do you call it, expertise to talk about that. Somebody whose name I can't say says, "Do you like Pakistan and India?" I guess I like every country equally. Alrighty, let's see here. Excellent start to the live stream today, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Jared. I'm here to answer all of your questions about politics. There's no judgments here. There's no roasting. There's no debating. This is not one of those shows where people fight. This is not a show where I call people up and I try to own them and then we yell at each other. I'm just here to answer all of your good faith questions about politics. Sometimes I get a little spicy. People are spicy at me, but I try not to do that. I do really try my best not to do that because I want to make this a space where you can ask whatever you want, regardless of if you are a Republican or a Democrat or a Trumper or a progressive or a centrist. I am just here to engage in good faith and answer all of your questions because I know that politics can be confusing. It's, we're not really sure where we can get accurate information anymore. And so I hope that people will use me as a resource in that way. Brandon C23 says, "Why do Democrats kowtow to parliamentarians?" The Republican also kowtowed to the parliamentarians. So What's the point of having the parliamentarian there if the party's just going to ignore them? Unidentified user says, why continue to live in the US? I mean, this is my home where everybody, all the people that I love the most are, and I grew up here, you know, like, why should I have to fucking leave, you know? Jake White says, how valid is this Rockland County voting story? It's very valid. They've moved on to discovery. I think it is the most substantive evidence that we have that the past election vote totals were potentially changed. And that means that we need to be on the phone with our representatives 24/7, demanding that they change those systems so that they can be sure to be free and fair going forward. Let's see here. Talk about the something attacks months ago between Pakistan and India. That's not really my expertise, you know. It's Never Boring says, where do you get your info from? I try to get my information from a variety of sources to avoid any kind of bias. The one thing I don't do is check out right-wing media, because right-wing media has been proven time and time again to be wildly inaccurate. By some estimates, 20% accurate, only 20% accurate, you know. Let's see here. Someone says, how about the Gaza conflict? What Israel is doing to people in Palestine is unconscionable, and we should stop sending them money and weapons because of that. Mighty Kane says, do you believe in the Obama started the Russia scandal thing? I don't believe that. Everything that the Trump administration is saying about that is a lie. And it has been proven to be a lie by people that are currently in the Trump administration. Marco Rubio signed off on that investigation during the first Trump administration. And the Russian investigation happened during the Trump administration, the first Trump administration. So yeah, the bullshit that they're trying to get us to swallow about what Obama may or may not have done to instigate the Russia investigation is wild. It is wild. It's some real fucking serious fiction. Alexis Fetter says, seriously, anyone that blames Israel and not Hamas is a terrorist sympathizer. Alexis, I think that you are not being productive, you know, because what I said was Israel was doing to the people in Palestine was unconscionable. I did not say that Hamas was, you know, a good organization or they have not done war crimes, because they have done war crimes, Alexis. So maybe you want to take the tone down and we can actually engage on these topics in good faith. Pizza Roll says, do you support abortion? I am pro-choice, so I do support a woman's right to choose. But even if you are pro-life, you still shouldn't vote for Republicans, because their policies don't actually decrease the number of abortions. They only make pregnancy more dangerous for women. Their entire motivation is not to decrease the number of pregnancies that happen. Their motivation is to create a population of desperate people who don't have time to better their lives and will be stuck in their situations of poverty and abuse. Let's see here. Alexis Fetter says, Hamas is starving the Gazans. Alexis, there's no evidence of that. And I would appreciate it if you would ask a question instead of making statements, because when you make statements, it is not productive. Jake White says, yeah, that's a follow. You are after it today. I appreciate you, Jake White. Average Joe, PG, I got your email. Thank you for sending that. There's basically two smaller parties within each major party already. At the very least, ranked choice voting allows for fewer wasted votes. Well, MAGA basically controls the right, so I may have given libertarians too much credit, LOL. Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that. Let's see here. James says, hi, do you think Trump is clearing his name from the Epstein list? It appears that way. Like, why else would they direct, like, hundreds of FBI agents to work round the clock searching for his name and all of the evidence? My guess is to redact it or to burn it, you know? Daniel Slur 828 says, boy, you are as biased as they come. What are you talking about? Non-biased? That's hysterical. I'm not biased. If you think that my saying the truth is biased, then I think you need to get your information from different sources. Cole says, what do you have against Trump? Trump is one of the most wildly corrupt and immoral human beings that has ever held the presidency. The crimes that he has done, the grift, the conning, the global instability, the human rights violations, the fact that he is treating ICE as his personal Gestapo and building concentration camps, raising the cost of living for the 99% while giving money to the top 1%, accepting bribes from invisible people, both foreign and domestic, through his crypto coin. Like, there's nothing good that he is doing. He is a big pile of corruption and grift and damage. Let's see here. All right. Mighty Kane says, do you agree with the U.S. tariff on countries that tariff the U.S.? The trade war that Trump has started is going to increase the cost of living and it's going to increase inflation. So I'm against it. Cole says, so you think Kamala would be a better president than Trump? 100% without a doubt. Anybody would be. Your cat would be. Fog War Productions, great to see you again. I think it's telling that we compared the Gestapo, but never the Kempeitai. I don't know what that is. Brennan C23 says, is there a potential Democratic candidate that you like? I don't really wish cast for the 2028 presidential election. I just say let's vote in the primary and then we'll work it out then. My main focus, though, is in getting people focused on the midterm elections that are coming up. Like, I want everybody laser focused on the midterms because if Democrats don't sweep the midterms, we're fucked. Cole says, I mean, to be frank, he is literally stopping wars. Cole, are you aware that he just sent nuclear subs to Russia? Cole, because he's not stopping any wars, Badger75 says, please explain tariffs. A lot of misinformation. Absolutely. Gani88 says, LOL, Trump hate by host is cringe. No, cringe is what your mom did when I fucked her last night. Alrighty, because she liked it so much, is what I was saying. Okay, so tariffs. Tariffs are a tax that we put on individuals and companies that are trying to bring goods in from other countries. So if Best Buy wants to buy a computer from China, it is an extra tax that they have to pay that those companies then move on to the consumer. So it slows down our economy. It locks us out of world trade. And it decreases the amount of goods that we can sell abroad. So people that have businesses or farms here in America are going to be losing money. They're supposed to be used like a scalpel, but Donald Trump is using them like a fucking mace, Alrighty, let's see here. It's never boring, says Cole. Please stay here. You have a lot to learn. It's never boring. I don't know. I have no response to that. Flamingo Mo says we have elections in Virginia this fall, and I'm excited. Hell yeah, do the work, Flamingo Mo. The Kempeitai was Imperial Japan Secret Police. Scary dudes. I don't know anything about those guys. James is very worried about the immigration situation. You think we'll end up like Germany? 100%, James. It is the parallels between what Trump is trying to do right now and what the Gestapo and Hitler were doing during the 1940s is it's scary. It is really scary. Wayne says, why doesn't Trump understand tariffs? He might. He just does. I don't think he needs to. He's just lying about it. Let's see here. Colton Sorensen says Vance 2028. I mean, that guy sucks too, let's see here. Elaine Reyes says, do you believe we need to fix the borders? If so, how different from Trump now? So how do we fix the borders? Like, what's the actual issue that is happening on the border, Elaine? Because before I get into like what are the actual policies that I think would help with immigration, I want to ask, what is the problem with what is currently going on? Immigrants are a net positive on our country. And yeah, if you live on a border town and there's people constantly sneaking through your backyard in the middle of the night, like that's really scary. And I can imagine why you would want more border security and potentially like a big fence protecting your property. But on the net, like all the problems that we ascribe to immigrants are actually created by rich people. So like, what is the problem that we're actually trying to solve? There was a bill that Republicans and Democrats wrote together during the Biden administration to address some of these immigration issues. And it had a lot to do with funding more Border Patrol and giving them more power. It was, the critique on the left of that bill was that it was too much of a giveaway to the right wing. And what happened with that bill that Republicans and Democrats wrote together that was filled with things that Republicans wanted? Donald Trump told the Republicans in Senate to vote against it so that he could continue running on immigration as an issue. The Republican Party doesn't give a shit about solving any of these problems. They want to continue immigration being a scapegoat for the billionaire class and use it to scare people into voting for them, All right, Badger75 says, we need more working people in America. Too many pencil pushers? Maybe. I don't know. Oh boy, we're popping off over on Twitch. It's the Rocketeer. Great to see you again. Trump just decided his team to fire the Commissioner of Labor Statistics over the latest jobs numbers report. The Donald Trump administration is lying to you. And anybody that's not lying in the Trump administration, Trump is firing. Let's see here. Average Joe PG says most major liberal content creators seem to believe that the Epstein saga will be what causes Trump supporters to break from him. I've seen no evidence that anything will cause them to stop supporting him. Do you lean toward the Epstein files being their line in the sand, or do you lean towards his narcissistic abuse victims looking for reasons to justify another broken promise? Whoa, excellent question, Average Joe PG. Very well said. We have written the obituary on the MAGA movement so many times in the past, and it's just never fucking happened. What I think the Epstein issue could potentially do is wrest away the anywhere from like 2 to 5% of the voters who voted for Trump or Republicans in 2024 that were swayed potentially by the propaganda and misinformation that they were getting on social media and through podcasts like Joe Rogan and Theo Vaughn and Andrew Schultz. But the MAGA base is not going anywhere, in my opinion. I think you're 100% right on that. Gigi, Lauren, good to see you again. Gigi says, is it true the whistleblower says Kamala won by a landslide, or what do you think? I also saw that report, and I'm skeptical because it was like somebody's blog basically that posted it, you know, until it gets to some legacy media or some substantive independent reporters, I'm not gonna pay attention to that. I think if you're looking for evidence that vote counts were potentially changed, the Rockland County case in New York is the most substantive evidence that we have. And we have to wait. We have to wait until discovery happens over there. But we don't have to wait to call our representatives and tell them that we want more accountability with electronic voting machines, that we want more oversight, that we want more hand counting, because there are whistleblowers out there already that are saying that these machines are way too hackable, and there are also whistleblowers out there saying that they've already been hacked. And so we can stop that. We can stop that by putting political pressure on our elected representatives. If you have Republican elected representatives, it will probably take more pressure than not. Let's see here. Don Lennon Jr. says, why do people deny provable things? Misinformation and propaganda. Let's see here. User a bunch of numbers says, what are your thoughts on people like Theo Vaughn recently criticized Trump over the genocide in Gaza? You know, I have an issue with Joe Rogan, Theo Vaughn, and Andrew Schultz, specifically because I am also a stand-up comedian. And, you know, the stand-up community has been getting their D's figuratively est for a long time over our role in society as being the truth tellers and the new philosophers and shit like that. And these guys have been going out there under the umbrella of we're the most independent thinkers there are, we're just telling it like it is. And they went out there and they got the most obvious fucking con man and dictator elected president. And it's like, what the fuck are you doing, guys? You know, like, not one of them asked about the fucking Epstein shit when he was sitting in the chair right in fucking front of them, you know? Like, what the fuck are you doing, guys? You know, it's unfucking believable. I view it as a betrayal to our craft that these guys were so fucking easy on him and sycophantic, you know? And the fact that they couldn't parse through the propaganda that they were absorbing through social media, they were just sort of like regurgitating it, like, it's unconscionable, you know? Now, I'm glad that they seem to be having their come to Jesus moment now and being like, wait a second, this guy that everybody told me was a liar lied to us. You know, this whole fucking like everybody is saying this one thing and therefore they must be wrong. Community of fucking contrarians is just so fucking annoying, you know. Alrighty, sorry about that, everybody. Nostradamus, great to see you again. How do we bridge the gap from the extreme polarization of MAGA and non-MAGA? You know, it takes a lot of work, Nostradamus, but I would recommend you check out a book called The Persuaders by Anand Giridharadas. Highly recommended. It talks all about the process of deep canvassing, having really lengthy and multiple conversations with people to try to bring them out of their propaganda rabbit holes. Don Lannon Jr. says, just the facts. You seem a little upset. Okay, Don. James says, even if Trump was gone today, everyone who's behind Project 2025 is still there. Yes, James, but they would have less power in the electoral sphere, and that would potentially tamp things down. You know, like the news media would be less scared of them. Higher education would be less scared of them. Other politicians would be less scared of them. So yeah, we could potentially see a more full-throated resistance once Trump, you know, kicks the bucket. Don Lannon Jr. says, who is your future president? I never wish cast for 28. I'm here to get people focused on 26. We got to own the midterms, everybody, or we are fucked. Boomer Kathy, good to see you again. Yes, when Trump is gone, we can worry a little bit less. I agree with that. Tim says, what do you think of AIPAC's influence in America? I am against it. AIPAC is an extreme right-wing organization. I do not believe that they or anybody should use millions of dollars to try to influence our politicians. And they are obviously clearly lobbying on behalf of the Israeli government. They have never advocated for anything other than the priorities of the Israeli government. So yeah, 100%. Kay says, did you see people just comments about trans athletes? I didn't. But I have heard that people are upset about them. And here's what I have to say about that. I do not believe, and I have no evidence of this, by the way, this is just me shooting from the cuff. I do not believe that any Democratic politician actually has worse beliefs about the trans community than any Republican politician. I believe that Democrats like Buttigieg and Newsom, who are sort of like, flip flopping or riding the fence on trans issues, are doing so as an appeal to the center so they can win presidency in 28. My only evidence of this is the way that Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton did not full-throatedly advocate for marriage equality in 2008. They both believed in marriage equality in 2008, but they were trying to win a general election, And so I think that Buttigieg and Newsom are making the same calculus. Is that the right thing to do? I don't know. I'm sure that there are Dennis Kucinich types who are going to be more full-throatedly in favor of the trans community, who are going to get their asses kicked in the primary, the way that Dennis Kucinich got his ass kicked in the primary. There's a fucking name for you guys. Blast from the past. Any of my other political junkies on here who know who fucking Dennis Kucinich is? All right. Elaine Prince says, I'm an Elian. I got rid of the E so I wouldn't get deported. I've seen Earth from space. It's flat. Okay. Don Lennon Jr. says, where are you from? America. Zero on the Run says, what Secret Service do we need to get old people to stop voting on policies? What secret sauce do we need to get old people to stop voting on policies they won't live to see? Zero on the Run. The voting bloc that we need to worry about is not old people anymore. It's young people. It is people that don't read the news. That is the main issue, is the massive discrepancy between people that are informed about what the government is doing and people that get their information off of social media. That is the gap that we need to bridge. All right, Don Lennon Jr. says, you aren't that funny. I was with your mom last night. Sarah says, do you believe every Dem should run on expanding the Supreme Court in 28? I do, but I don't know if that'll win them elections, but I do think that they should. Don Lennon Jr. says, you are weak. Your mom called me strong last night. Zero on the Run says, the people who are informed versus people who are informed. Got it. Yeah, 100%. Fog War Productions says, reject the false dichotomy and embrace the third position. Earth is a cube. Justin says, this guy got 6 boosters. No, but I did give your mom 6 boosters last night. Alrighty, let's scroll up. Scrolling up. User a bunch of numbers says, I've always learned so much listening to you. Thank you for being honest and factual. You're welcome, user a bunch of numbers. Let's see here. Scrolling up, scrolling up, scrolling up, scrolling up. All right. Justin got his name back. Says trans issues are adult issues. Children shouldn't be involved, and they have no place in sports. Should people that are trans not be able to play sports, Justin? I think that we should have a place where trans people can play sports. Alrighty, let's see here. Justin says, not against females. So you think that men who transition into females should play in the league with men? Is that the compromise that you think would work better? That we have a bunch of football players and some of them are women, essentially. Let's see here. All right, Justin. What if those trans women get hurt really badly because they no longer have the physical advantages of natural-born males because they went through the transition? Justin, how do you feel about that? How do you feel about trans women getting fucking clobbered by men who have not gone through any sort of hormone therapy? Fog War Productions says, how can Dems address conservatives' fears of rural marginalization? Excellent question, Fog War Productions. Justin says, what if those trans women hurt actual women badly? There's a debate tactic that people use when they're trying to divert attention away from anything that would hurt their priors, Justin, to just ask a different question back. So what do you think about what I said? What about my question? All right. So, Fogmore Productions, how can Dems address conservative fears of rural marginalization? You sent me a great email that was really long about all of that issue. And so, I would love to send you a really long email back in response. But the short version is I think that there's a difference between rural marginalization and a desire for things to never change. And I feel like the Democratic Party has done an amazing job of letting everybody know, regardless of if they live in rural counties or red counties or wherever, that we are not going to forget you, that you will not be left behind, that we want to make sure that you're being taken care of as the world changes and grows. And I feel like rural America, red America, heard that and said, you're going to force us to change. You're going to force us to get different jobs. You're going to force us to have trans kids in our schools and learn about gay people, et cetera, and take our guns, et cetera, et cetera. And so I don't think that we need to be, I think that we need to be sympathetic to people who are scared of the radical amount of change that's been happening in society over the last couple of decades. Things have been going very fast. And for certain groups of people, regardless of how old they are or where they live, that's terrifying. And I totally get that. But I don't think that we should be encouraging citizens to be entitled to have the exact same life now as they did when they were kids, or an imagined life from the 1950s that doesn't really exist anymore. And how do we do that? How do we get rid of that entitlement? How do we help people who are literally just suffering from fear of change, which is legitimately scary? Like that, I'm not 100% sure about. But yeah, I think that's the main issue, as opposed to a Democratic Party that has left rural counties behind. And part of my evidence of that is rural counties have been, they've been governed by Republicans for a long time. So if anybody's responsible for them actually being left behind, it's the Republican Party. Let me know what you think about all of that, my guy. Dan Blackwood says we also have to protect marginalized communities who are targets of the conservatives in question. That is completely accurate. Zero on the Run says I'm a 25-year collegiate and professionally trained fencer. Ooh, cool. Let's see here. User a bunch of numbers says thoughts on the idea that anyone who chose not to vote for this is complicit in Trump's actions. User, I completely get being angry at people that voted for Republicans or got tricked into not voting. You got tricked into being apathetic during the 24 election, and now we're all suffering through this. But I don't think that it's productive to play the blame game. I think what's more productive is to build a coalition. I think what's more productive is to coalesce around a shared objective of unelecting every Republican from president to dog catcher as soon as we possibly can. Obviously the president isn't up for re-election in 26. Not every senator is up for re-election in 26, but we can do a lot of good in 26 if we just work together with everybody that will join us in this goal, in this crusade. All right, scrolling down to the bottom. Summer Rose says, how far left are you, if I might ask? I'm a progressive, so if there's a specific issue that you want to know where I land on, go ahead and ask it. Badger75 says national election holiday. I'm for that, but also let's have vote by mail and early voting and ballot boxes and all the ways that make voting easier. User a bunch of numbers says talking more about those who decided not to vote because both would support Gaza genocide, for example. Yeah, like that makes me angry also. But I also get it, like it is difficult to parse being a Democrat and seeing your Democratic representatives voting to continue to send money and weapons to Israel after they have been found to be guilty of war crimes, after Israeli organizations have, concluded that what's going on there is a genocide, that scholars of the Holocaust are saying, that Jewish scholars of the Holocaust are saying that this is currently a genocide. And yeah, you feel betrayed and you don't want to be associated with this moral abomination. My position has always been that better is better and worse is worse. And that's, even if Kamala Harris only did what Biden was doing, it would still be better than what Trump is currently doing. So we would rather have that. There'd be more Palestinians alive under that than not. And that the Democratic Party is more susceptible to political pressure, and that we could have changed their policy by yelling at them during town halls. Democratic politicians don't cancel their town halls because they're getting yelled at the way that Republican politicians do. But yeah, I still don't think that yelling at those people is the solution. I think let's agree on a shared reality that what Trump is doing now is worse than what Biden was doing in 2020 and 2024 through 2024. And then how do we solve that problem? Like already the Democratic Party is moving on this issue, and half of the Senate voted to stop sending money and weapons to Israel. Half of the Democratic Senate. All the Republicans voted to continue sending it. The rhetoric even coming from the Democratic Party is better on this than the rhetoric coming out of the Republican Party, where Donald Trump is openly advocating for ethnically cleansing Gaza, where Lindsey Graham was saying, let's just fucking nuke the place. Where I forget what the dude's name was. Some Republican representative was told that children are starving in Palestine, and he said, let them starve, or go ahead and starve, or some shit like that. They're fucking monsters about this. All right, CEJ says, who'd you vote for? Democrats up and down the ballot. Let's see here. Grumpy Cat says, hi back. Alrighty, Flamingo Moses, my 21-year-old daughter said if voters stayed home, the parties didn't do a good enough job. What I would say to your daughter, Flamingo Mo, is that we already have a system that looks like when people don't vote, because there are more people that don't vote than vote for either of the parties. So if not voting made the parties better, then they would be better. So let's try voting instead, is what I would say to your 21-year-old daughter. Fogworld Productions says, I appreciate your insights. Thank you. It's a number one concern GOP voters have. Yeah, do you think I got anything wrong there, Fogworld Productions? I really appreciate communicating with you on these issues, Zero on the Run says, there are many cases of smaller men injuring bigger men, women injuring men. What is your point? I completely agree with you, my guy. All right, scrolling down to the bottom, Grumpy Cat says, the building of the new Golden Ballroom with unidentified donors. Quid pro quo corruption, 100%, Grumpy Cat. The Trump administration their pardons are so wildly corrupt. It is unfucking believable. He has a crypto coin where people can put money into his pockets and then he will give them pardons. He is pardoning corporations and individuals that have scammed American citizens, and judges have given out have told them that they have to pay back their victims. And Trump commuted that sentence, meaning that he just took money from the American people and gave it to the people that scammed them. It's fucking unconscionable, and it's reason 1,560,000,000 why nobody should ever vote for any Republican ever again. Alrighty, let's see here. Back over to Twitch. Average Joe typing up a storm over here. Average Joe says, regarding trans rights, do you think it could be positively messaged in the same way Mamdani spoke about Israel's right to exist? If a right-wing bigot wants to focus on the topic, just say something to the effect of, I believe in every human right to exist. Average Joe, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head as far as, like, we have to change the frame, because the Republican talking heads around this issue and Republican elected officials, they will just always try to reframe the conversation in a way that makes it seem like Democrats are for men beating the shit out of women in sports, and men cheating by transitioning into women, during sports and stuff like that. So yeah, how we change that frame, I'm not 100% sure. I think there's a couple of data points that are really interesting and informative about how few people there are that this affects. There are like 11 people that this affects. Men who transition into women and then play sports do not hold the record in the sports that they are competing in. The records are all still being held by women. The Olympics is not just gold, silver, medal, women who used to be men. It is still mostly natural-born women who are even admitted into the Olympics, So, yeah. James says, do you think we'll ever divorce Israel? If we do the work, James, of electing politicians that are courageous enough to stand up to AIPAC, if we can convince people to not believe propaganda paid for by AIPAC, to unelect politicians that stand up to them, like, Cori Bush or the other person whose name I forgot again. I want to say Omar something. So yeah, like it's up to us. Lindsay Reed says, "What do you think about Trump sending nuclear subs to Russia?" This fucking dick measuring contest that he has with Putin is the thing that's going to start World War III, as opposed to all the fucking shit that people complained about during the Biden administration. And for anybody out there that's been talking about Donald the Dove, like look, the second somebody challenges his masculinity by not doing what he says, he fucking sends nuclear subs. He assassinates Iranian generals. He bombs Iran. Like he is not tamping down global tensions. What is going on right now in the Middle East is his fault because he was kicking sand into the face of terrorist organizations like Hamas and the Houthis. And then so they fought back, and then Israel fought back, and now there's this fucking cycle of escalating violence over there. Alrighty, let's see here. Why art thou? Says time for third party with support from the other party. I look at the people calling for a third party. Why art, Eero, and I don't think that they understand the difficulty behind not only starting a third party and building up support for a third party and getting everybody to vote for a third party and beating the name ID that the Republicans and Democrats currently have is so much harder than just voting in the primary and changing the party that way. If we voted for better Democrats in the primary, if voter participation in the primaries was above 40%, then the Democratic Party would look like how we want it to look. Additionally, for people that want a third party, why does the party have to mirror your beliefs exactly? Why does every politician need to be your morality exactly? Why can't we have a political party that represents the wide breadth of political beliefs that America is? Yeah, it really rubs me the wrong way. It generally kind of feels like a bunch of different excuses to not do things. It's like, I'm not going to vote until I have a politician that mirrors my values exactly, or, yeah, I'm not gonna do any work. I'm not gonna, support any candidates. All that stuff, and then they get to point at, whatever election results happened and say, see, this is because you didn't cater to what I wanted, instead. Prod says, opinion on John Hawley. Do you mean Josh? Because I don't know who John Hawley is. If you mean Josh, he's a piece of shit and a liar. He is lying about being a populist so that he can run for president. Let's see here. Jamal Bowman, thank you. It's the Rocketeer. I appreciate that. All right. Mikey D says, who do you think will win? Ooh, hand heart. That's an interesting thing. Thank you for all the gifts, everybody. I really appreciate it. Let's see here. Summer Rose says, I hope Hunter and Jack run together. Yeah, that'll be fun to watch. Who do you think will win as the next Tunisian president? Oh, that is not my area of expertise. I don't know anything about what's going on in Tunisia at the moment. Mikey D says, what's your opinion on the South Korean election? Again, not my area of expertise. It is mainly American politics that I am up on, and mostly contemporary American politics. Mikey D says, you said anything political. Yeah, you can ask any political question. I can't answer every political question. Label K Sip says, what do you think about Mark Kelly for president, Mitt Romney for VP? It's interesting that more than one person has asked me about that. But yeah, I don't believe in a party that merges candidates from both parties, because I do not believe that the Republican Party platform has anything valid in it. Like, what have they done? What is in their platform that actually makes sense or works besides like empty platitudes, like having a strong border and having a strong economy? It's like everybody wants that. Getting rid of government waste, everybody wants that. How are you going to do that? Oh, you're just going to cut taxes for billionaires again, and you're going to cut regulations so these companies can just spill a whole bunch of toxic sludge into our drinking water, and all our kids are going to get fucking cancer? That's your solution to it? Oh, great. Yeah, wonderful. Let's get Mitt Romney on the fucking ticket, All right, Summer Rose, take your dog out. User a bunch of numbers says, you're right, but the VP role at this point is to try to gain votes. Romney may appeal to moderates. I mean, we can get the moderates in other ways, like I don't even believe that the moderates, when we do things to appeal to the moderates, propagandists use that to whittle away at the base. Where Liz Cheney went out there and campaigned with Kamala Harris to get the moderate voters. And progressives looked at that, or progressives, I mean like right-wing bots who are pretending to be progressives to get people to be cynical about politics and not vote. They went out there and said, look at Kamala Harris campaigning with Liz Cheney. That means that the Democrats are just the same as Republicans and voting doesn't do anything. Or that means that Kamala Harris is so extremely to the right, she's basically not even a Democrat. She's like a Republican also. So we shouldn't vote. It's not that, it doesn't, yeah, don't vote, guys, don't vote. You know? So yeah, when you appeal to the base, you lose the moderates. When you appeal to the moderates, you lose the base. You know, I just say, let's just fucking convince people that our platform is better, you know? But also, we have to do the work because no matter what the Democrats do or say, the bots are going to come out there and say that it's the wrong thing. The Democrats get yelled at no matter what they do. They are simultaneously too far to the left and too far to the right and doing too much and doing too little. So the 2% of the voting populace that's going to believe that shit and either vote for Republicans or not vote at all, we have to be the ones that catch those people and talk to them in real life because there's no winning on the internet. It has been completely captured by the billionaire class. Alrighty, let's see here. Lycanthrope says, ridiculous, both parties are the same. Of course a fucking werewolf would think that. That is completely inaccurate, Lycanthrope. If you want me to give you data points to show you why that is inaccurate, I will happily do that. But if you're just going to call me a liar and a cuck, I don't really want to waste my breath on it. Fletch Lives Again says, do you think voting is safe from interference? I kind of don't, which is why I think that we need to be on the phone with our representatives 24/7 demanding that we have safer electoral systems because these voting machines are extremely hackable and by some accounts have already been hacked. Let's see here. Joseph Jimenez says, why do we need political parties? They can be really useful as a shorthand for what the parties believe in. Like if it's a Republican politician, I know that they don't believe in climate change. They believe in cutting regulations that keep poisonous chemicals out of our drinking water. They don't believe in doing any sort of gun control. They believe in expanding the power of the presidency and removing the power of regulatory agencies. And if it's Democratic candidates, I know they generally believe in climate change and strengthening the unions and doing something about gun control and empowering the government to help everybody instead of just the 1%. Lycanthrope Defense System says, not inaccurate. Both are violent. Both have their gods in DC. Both spend. Well, again, Lycanthrope, I offered to engage with you on this, and you just decided to say no. So you're out of here. This is not what we do here. We actually engage with each other. We're not just here to fight and call each other dumb. User a bunch of numbers says, I'm pretty far to the left, but believe voter ID, if free and easily accessible, is a good idea. I completely agree with you, user a whole bunch of numbers, but two things about that. Number one, the Republican Party has already admitted at like CPAC and a bunch of private donor meetings that the entire purpose of voter ID is voter suppression of Democratic voters. It makes it easier for them to make it hard enough on Democratic voters that they can whittle away, 1, 2, 3%. It's the reason why they close down polling locations in Democratic areas so that the line will be 6 hours long and people will just have to go home or go to work. They close down DMVs in Democratic areas so that it's harder for people to get IDs, so they won't be able to vote. So yeah, my compromise with the right on this issue is make IDs free and easy to get. And if you don't do that, then you are just proving that the only reason why you want this is to stop Democrats from voting. All right, Nostradamus says, Medicare for all, can we make it happen? 100%, Nostradamus, but I think we need to be clear-eyed about how difficult it is going to be. Even if we had, in the government, only politicians who were on board with the program of switching us over from private healthcare to public healthcare, it will still be a ton of work. So let's take the reality of the situation here. Let's say we have enough of a majority in the government to actually make that switch happen. We're going to have centrist Democrats. They're going to be fighting against that. We're going to be having Republicans fighting against that. We're going to have the entire billionaire class coming down on this project like a fucking megaton bomb to do everything they can to muck up the works or stop it entirely and slam whatever politicians are doing it and making up lies about it. It will be the same as the fight during the Affordable Care Act negotiations, only times 1,000. Because the Affordable Care Act was just making tweaks to the current system to try to save people's lives and make healthcare more affordable. And the billionaire class, they fucking brought the hammer down I read Dark Money by Jane Mayer. She talks about this specifically in that book. And just like how fucking gobsmacked the Obama administration was, just like, what the fuck happened? Like, we had a mandate. Like, why is everybody so fucking mad at us right now? Why is everybody fucking talking about death panels? That's not a fucking thing, It's gonna be 1,000 times worse, So, and how do we solve that problem? We have to do the work. Because just hoping the Democrats are so fucking flawless, fucking Neo in the Matrix about it all, just like dodging every attack and perfectly countering everything and making sure that Republicans or fucking Joe Manchin types don't torpedo this with whatever they're fucking trying to do. That is a recipe for disaster. So we have to do the work. Alrighty, Lindsay Reed says, "Don't Dems need to be more aggressive?" I think so, but I mean, I think it's a winning solution that Democrats should be more aggressive. But number one, when they get more aggressive, then the right-wing propaganda machine gets spun up and talks about how the Democrats are forcing this down our throats and this is government takeover and taking away your rights and it's a socialist, conspiracy, blah, blah, blah. Which they do anyways, but it has a little bit more credence if you actually see people making aggressive moves. That's number one. Number two is I get why Democrats are gun shy, because for decades they have been getting yelled at no matter what they do. Bill Clinton and his administration were very neoliberal, corporate-friendly Democrats, and they still got called communist and socialist, and they're coming to take your guns, and they got yelled at by progressives saying that you're just Republican light, blah blah blah. And then you get more progressive Democrats, and then they lose elections, and then everybody yells at them for losing. Like, why can't you win elections? You Democrats. So yeah, they're getting yelled at no matter what they do. They're too far to the left. They're too far to the right. They're doing too much. They're doing too little. And the game is totally stacked against them with the Senate map, the Electoral College, gerrymandering, the information environment, campaign finance, laws being so fucking loosey-goosey that billionaires can pour unlimited amounts of money into whatever Republican candidates they want and fund unlimited amounts of right-wing propaganda on the internet. And then we yell at Democrats for losing elections. Like, what, they're playing fucking 1-on-5, like, it's unfair. So I get it. I get why they want to focus group everything that they say and then end up sounding like robots. I get why they want to soft pedal everything so they don't make anybody mad, Alrighty, let's see here. User a bunch of numbers says, "Do you agree that Dems need to run a white man in 28 because the U.S. isn't ready for a woman?" I don't agree with that. I think that anybody would have told you that in 2008, a black man had zero chance of being elected president, and then one was. I think it's natural that Democratic voters would be worried about that because Donald Trump has only lost to a straight white man, where a white woman and a woman of color got beaten by him. So yeah, I get it. And Democratic voters are going to play pundit with their votes and not vote for who they want, but vote for who they think can win. But I don't think that's a winning strategy. I think you should vote for who you want to be president. All right. Typical German says, "Do politics still work? And what's the daily dosage so I don't OD?" I would say every time you pass a window, if you feel like putting your fist through it, you are reading too much in the news. So yeah, take a chill pill, go see a movie, go hang out with some friends, etc. Persian Prince says, "There is no left or right." That is wildly inaccurate. And yeah, politics do still work. There are a multitude examples of politics either making people's lives better or worse, depending on who is in charge. And people's lives get better when Democrats are in charge, and they get worse when Republicans are in charge. There's a ton of data. Let's see here. User a bunch of numbers says, "I've seen that claim made by some leftist circles." Yeah, and I don't think that it is. I don't know how inaccurate it is to say that America might be too misogynistic or racist or homophobic to elect somebody that is not just a tall, straight white man. I don't know how inaccurate that statement is. But I do know that we elected Barack Obama in 2008 when America was potentially more racist than it is now, less progressive than it is now. So yeah, I think we just need to vote for somebody who is authentic and a good communicator and can stand by their platform and convince people to vote for them. Die Nexus says opinion of Trump presidency. It is one of the worst in history, one of the most corrupt in history, one of the most damaging in history. Lindsay Reed says Katie Porter for 2028. I love Katie Porter. I will support her no matter what she does. Big Ace Jack says 1 on 5. The Democrats have had control of the media for years. If any party has unfair help, it's the Dems. That is wildly inaccurate, Big Ace Jack. If you would like me to engage with you to explain why I think that that is inaccurate, I will. But if you're just going to call me a jerk and a cuck and stupid, then I don't want to waste my breath. But let me know if you're here in good faith, and I will happily, I will happily elucidate and get more into things. Eli Arnold says Obama got elected because people were tired of warmongering Republicans. I mean, that's one option, Eli, but why did people not vote for Hillary Clinton? You know, like she was a Democrat also. Let's see here. User a bunch of numbers says mainstream media ruined Bernie's campaign in 2016. In my opinion, I think that that is a totally valid critique. User a bunch of numbers. I think that's potentially a valuable piece of the pie there. You know. Holy moly! Holy guacamole! Big Ace Jack has not responded. Well, it's almost like that guy doesn't give a shit about what anybody has to say besides himself. How about that? Alrighty. Average Joe PG says, I disagree with the assumption that appealing to the left would lose moderates. Moderate Dems would never vote for a dictatorial wannabe. Moderate Republicans would never vote for an authoritarian. But ignoring the left of center base created the feeling of being ignored. I believe that's where most of the missing 9 million votes went last election. What is your opinion of that assessment? I think it's interesting, Average Joe PG, but the argument that people on the far left make to say that sorry, I want to walk back. The argument that people make to say that if Democrats appeal to the center, they're not going to lose progressives because progressives would never vote for an authoritarian, or they would never allow an authoritarian to get elected because they would, sit out the election or something. Is we have seen is demonstrably false. I personally fall down on what I mean. I think we generally agree with each other, Average Joe, because I think that when we run progressives, it is a more attractive platform. And so, regardless of how much smear campaigning goes on, we end up winning those elections because people like that platform. Barack Obama ran as a much more progressive president than he was, and it was very attractive to the American public, in addition to him being very charismatic and a good speaker. But that's the argument that the other side will make, is that if you appeal to the far left, then you lose the moderates because they will believe that the left has become too extreme and that there's no party that represents them right now, and sometimes they will vote for the Republican as just sort of like a to protect us from the extremism of the left kind of a thing. What I have learned digging into politics and digging into crosstabs and polling is that the voter base is way weirder and more eclectic than we could possibly imagine. The Obama Romney voters and the Bernie Trump voters and the the Biden Hegseth stands. It is a big cornucopia of weird ass disparate beliefs. And so, there's no if you do this, you will definitely lose these voters. And there's no if you do this, you will definitely get those voters back. I think that the key is to have a platform that helps everybody and be able to sell that platform authentically. You can't sound like you're reading off of a script. That's, I'm kind of talking off the dome here, Alrighty. Eli Arnold says, too bad Mamdani is an immigrant. I mean, he hasn't even won mayor yet, my guy. We're not going to talk about him running for president already, Armani Thomas says, hey, can I join? My question is too long to type. Thanks. I almost never have people do that, Armani, but if you ask a question and prove to me that you were here in good faith, then potentially I'll change my mind. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle fan 83 says, we need someone who do what they promised and not just lip service to get elected. TMNT fan, I agree with the sentiment, but when people complain about politicians not doing what they say they're going to do, sometimes I worry that we're not recognizing how difficult it is to do things. Part of the strength of the Republican Party is that their platform is that government is bad. And so that when they get elected, they don't do things and they break things to prove how bad the government is. And one of the things that hinders the Democratic Party is that their platform is that we're going to make things and make things better and fix things. And that's really hard, especially when you are governing by committee. You know, when you're in a democratic world where you have norms and laws that you have to uphold, it's difficult to get things done. You know, that's what like the whole book Abundance is about, is governments trying to, you know, build high-speed rail and obey every law in the books, and then it going $30 billion and 30 years over what was anticipated, you know, shit like that. So yeah, I don't think the criticism is that politicians lie to get elected. I think the critique is that we don't make being a politician easy, and then we judge politicians for not being able to do this really hard job. Scanty says, why do you support Trump? I don't. Zara says, will Trump's billionaire buddies rein him in after economic downturn? Probably not, you know, because what Trump is doing is building ICE into his own personal Gestapo. And so he will then be able to threaten any billionaire that tries to move away from him or take away funding with being sent to fucking alligator Auschwitz, you know. Non-consensual learning says, Epstein bought his island in 98. Trump last flew with him in 97. Do you still think Trump went there? I have no idea if Trump went to the island or not, but he definitely was really good friends with him for a long time. He knew that Epstein was doing statutory rapes. He has been accused of doing statutory rapes from women who said that they were 13 years old at the time, 14 years old at the time. They've been pictured together dozens of times. There's that super creepy, birthday card that he sent Jeffrey Epstein. The connections between Trump and Epstein and the illegal child sex things that Epstein was doing are multitudinous and strong. So I think it is only natural that we assume that Trump did that shit. I think it only makes sense to assume that. Alrighty, let's see here. Yeah, and people in the comments, non-consensual learning, are filling in the blanks of all the things that I just forgot. Like I just named a dozen reasons why it makes sense to assume that Trump was doing that shit with Epstein, and people are saying, "Oh, Jared, you forgot all this stuff," you know, because there's just so much evidence, you know. Right, Armani Thomas says, "How do we convince people every ism that applies to Trump is nothing compared to his narcissism?" Oh, that's an interesting question. I think the key is to talk about how what Trump and the Republican Party is doing that hurts them right now. Because I think that where it gets lost in the sauce is asking people to make these leaps of logic. Like, he's a fascist. And people go, okay, why is that bad? You know, and then we have to explain not only why he's a fascist, but why being a fascist is bad. And then that takes extra energy. Whereas, you know, saying that Trump is so corrupt that he nominated a secretary of education that doesn't know that that AI stands for artificial intelligence and called it A1. Our Secretary of Education doesn't understand what artificial intelligence is, and they are not smart enough to be able to give your children a quality education, you know. And he nominated a Secretary of Defense that was drunk texting secret war plans to his buddies over a hackable, messaging app. That president is not keeping you safe. That Department of Defense is not keeping you safe. Stuff like that. But again, you know, the big takeaway, I think, from all of this communication strategy is that we have to do it. We can't sit around and hope that the Democrats can get their message out, because for every reason that I've already mentioned, the game is so thoroughly stacked against the Democratic Party that even if they came up with the most perfect messaging strategy, it would get drowned out by billionaire propaganda on social media. And so we have to be the mouthpieces. We have to do the work. And ideally, we should be doing this work in public, in person, because we can do it on the internet like I'm doing, but it's going to get drowned out, you know? My live numbers are not nearly strong enough to combat all of this misinformation, which is why part of my live stream is communicating to y'all that we got to do this work in person, and we have to recruit other people to do this work, because that is the only advantage that we have over the billionaire class, is there are way more of us than there are of them. Alrighty, Kale says, why did Joe Biden let so many Venezuelans enter that infamous app that made people hate immigrants? I don't know what you're talking about, KL, but the Biden administration was allowing people to legally seek asylum and was granting people legal residency in America. And those Venezuelans were not doing anything wrong here in America. Like maybe there were one or two that slipped through the cracks that did some crimes, but mostly immigrants are net positive, KL. So I'm not really sure what you're referring to. Susie says, why is Trump getting away with selling pardons? Because right now the government is in his control. And so anybody that would rein him in, Congress, the judiciary, whatever, they are all either on board with all the illegal and corrupt shit that Trump is doing, or they're too scared of him to stand up to him. Tyrone Shoelaces says Trump putting 2 nuclear subs close to Russia 2 hours ago adds to this awful movie. Completely agree with you there. Inispian says Shalom. I also agree we need to send all our tax dollars to Israel. I do not agree with that. I do not think that we should be sending our tax dollars to Israel. It's the Rocketeer. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting just announced they're shutting down in 2026 due to lack of funding. So yeah, that's a real fucking bummer. Lumix says, what is the meaning of life? Joy. That is the meaning of life. Lumix, thank you for being here. Richard Lamar says, not a net positive, stop lying. That's not a question, so you are out of here. All right, TMNT fan says, right, Karen it up and make noise if you want something done. I agree with that. Yeah, let's fucking call. Man, call fucking 24/7. Politicians work for us, so call your fucking dicks off, everybody, and your pussies. Brandon Wallace says, BlackRock CEO killing another adjuster or really CTE? The only place, Brandon, where I have seen reporting that the gunman in New York was going after BlackRock as opposed to the NFL was on social media. And we have to remember that social media is the Wild West. So there's been no substantive reporting to suggest that this guy was doing anything besides trying to get revenge on the NFL for CTE. He apparently had a suicide note that said that it was because of CTE. And until I see some actual evidence that it was anything other than that, I am not going to believe that this was some sort of Mangione cover-up to try to get people to not start a class war against the billionaires. Abdul Kaderi says, I heard that a lot of January 6 convicts are working for ICE. Is that true? I haven't seen that reporting. I've seen people talking about that on social media. And again, social media is the Wild West. So, let's see here. Betty says, what's your opinion of all the CEOs dropping like flies? I don't know if we're having more CEO deaths than normal this year or the last year, but I think that if there's any evidence of karma, it's that, because these people have been starving us and ruining our fucking lives and letting people die by canceling their fucking cancer treatments and paying them too little to survive and shit like that. And so yeah, if there is such a thing as karma, I think bad things happening to CEOs is evidence of it. Let's see here. Betty says, saying NFL and killing CEOs, those are the facts. I think that there were some NFL people that were shot as well, Betty, right? KL says, well, I was a Democrat, but I feel the party stopped listening to us. I don't feel that way, KL. What is the issue that you feel the Democratic Party is not listening to you about? Alrighty. Public says, is tsunami belongs to politics? I mean, I guess disaster relief could count, public, as politics. Ooh, interesting. Cool. Over on Twitch, we got Average Joe. I recently wrote a paper for my political behavior course, and there was compelling evidence in polling data that Harris's refusal to break with Biden or Gaza was the greatest factor in her loss. I think that is a significant driver of people not voting for her. Average Joe PG. And I think it's further evidence of the internet and the social media sphere being weaponized against the Democratic Party. Because there's a ton of evidence out there before the election that Kamala Harris would have been better on Trump than this issue. Too close to Biden for a lot of people, too close to Biden for my taste, of course, but still better than Trump. But the connection was never made for those voters that better is better and worse is worse. It was just completely dogmatic, no votes for people that do genocide, or let's vote for Trump. It'll really teach the Democrats a lesson about, funding genocide and shit like that. And that's a massive disconnect, if you purport to really care about the people that live there. Like, why not vote for somebody who's going to do 10% less of a genocide than the other person? You know what I mean? As callous as that fucking sounds, you know? I personally believe that the Harris administration would have been way better than Biden on this issue. Maybe not perfect, but we're already seeing the Democrats move on this issue, where half of the Democratic senators voted against sending more money and weapons to Israel. You know, so yeah, I understand people being upset about this issue and that causing them to want to not vote. But yeah, I will stand by better is better and worse is worse. Right. Let's see here. KL says they did Bernie Sanders wrong also 2 times already. Chose Kamala instead of having voting. So KL, you are repeating a bunch of propaganda that assists the Republican Party. What you're saying is not like fully inaccurate, but it is framed in a way that makes it seem like the Democratic Party is this like nefarious institution that just puts forward their own candidates and fucks over everybody else. The DNC definitely put their finger on the scale against Bernie Sanders during the primaries, but also Bernie Sanders lost those primaries like by a lot, where I don't think the DNC's made any effect on those vote totals, you know. And Bernie Sanders, I was a Bernie guy, I was Elizabeth Warren guy. They lost, you know, and they potentially lost because people think that the word association of socialism in their titles was going to lose them the general election. And as far as like Kamala Harris being chosen by the DNC, like they had 100 days for the until the election happened. Like there's no way that another primary could have happened in that time. They couldn't even have gone to the convention because Ohio was threatening to leave the Democrats off of their state ballots if they didn't give them the name of a candidate, you know? So like KL, what were they supposed to do, man? What was the move? All right, KL says, I feel like they were once for the people, but not anymore. I am in no way a Republican. KL, they're still for the people. They were breaking apart monopolies. Their NLRB was finding in favor of unions for the first time in generations. They were bringing down medication costs and healthcare costs for the 99%. You know, they weren't cutting taxes for the billionaires and cutting government programs that you and I need to make our lives easier. You know, maybe they're not as aggressively one way or the other as you want them to be, but they're still way better than the Republican Party, don't you think? Abdul Kaderi says, which party created the most jobs since 1989? I'm pretty sure it's the Democratic Party. Non-consensual learning says, do you feel we were lied to when the media told us Joe Biden was the best, sharp as a tack? So I have not read Jake Tapper's book that really delves into who knew what about Biden's mental state. I will say that the media was not saying that Biden was with it. They were questioning the way that they are supposed to do as reporters, and the people in the Biden administration were saying that he was still smart as a whip and running laps around everybody, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, I don't view that as a dereliction of duty by the mainstream media. And in fact, I think that they were pretty even-handed considering the propaganda that was coming out of right-wing media about how he's a mental patient and he's drooling and he's half dead already. And it's like, yeah, the Fox News is like the boy that cried. Democrats are dementia patients. You know, it's like you spend so much energy defending against that stuff that sometimes you miss the forest for the trees. Let's see here. Angry Long Island Vet says, was Biden competent as his job or not? I mean, if we're just looking at his accomplishments, fucking extremely competent, you know? Alrighty. Okay. Average Joe PG says it doesn't really matter what Jake Tapper wrote, to be honest. We could all see it. The Dems were just at various levels of denial. Yeah, my stance was that even if Joe Biden was a pile of dusty bones, he would still be a better president than Donald Trump, and that's what I was advocating for. But what people are still fighting about, Average Joe, is what did the DNC know and how complicit are they? How much can we not trust Democrats going forward because they quote unquote hid Joe Biden's dementia diagnosis from the rest of us? And the case that I am making is that this is not the fault of the Democratic Party. This is the fault of a few key insiders who knew what was going on, specific Biden insiders, people like Hunter, who were shielding him from the general public and from the DNC en masse. B-Man says, you see the interview that one TikTok guy did with Hunter? I mean, I heard some, what do you call it? I heard some, some clips from it, and yeah, I don't really care for this Hunter fella. Alrighty. B-Man says, Hunter said Biden was pumped full of meds for all 4 years. I don't believe that he was the one calling the shots. If he wasn't, whoever was did a fucking bang up job. Let's see here. KL says, what did you think of Andrew Yang? Was he a good candidate back when he was running? I really liked Andrew Yang for bringing universal basic income to the forefront. Aside from that, he was basically just a Democrat, and I think that him trying to start a new party based off of being a slightly different kind of Democrat was kind of, unproductive. Additionally, why do rich people think that they should just run for president without doing anything fucking else in government? It's valuable to have outsider perspectives, sure, but it just seems so fucking egotistical to be like, I'm rich, I should be the one in charge of fucking the entire country. I have a lot more faith in people that were senators first, or fucking mayors first. At least you just do something in government before you jump to the fucking, the number one spot. B-Man says, what is your opinion on the Obama situation and how he perpetuated the Russia collusion hoax? B-Man, there is no Russia collusion hoax. The people in the current Trump administration were on the committee that handled the Russia investigation during the first Trump administration, and they signed off on it. Marco Rubio signed off on it. Everything the Trump administration is telling you right now about that Obama quote-unquote scandal is full-on bullshit. And the bullshit doesn't even match the other bullshit that they're tying it to. None of it makes any fucking sense. Let's see here. KL says, so you think UBI is a good idea then? Absolutely, 100%. I think it's necessary as we move towards more automation and artificial intelligence. There's going to be so many fewer jobs left over. We need to be taking care of people. Otherwise, it's going to be fucking Thunderdome out there, Let's see here. B-Man says, I thought they were going to try Obama, though. What do you mean by try Obama? Like, indict him? Let's see here. Angry Long Island Vet says 2024, let's vote for the alcoholic. 2028, let's vote for the bartender. AOC. I think it's weird that you think that being a bartender disqualifies AOC. So yeah, I don't know what your vibe is, Angry Long Island Vet, but I don't think that you're here in good faith. Public says, does the U.S. can stop World War? Not this administration, that's for damn sure. Let's see here. Non-consensual learning says tariff agreements with Japan and South Korea. Do you feel those were good deals? They weren't good deals because they are increasing tariffs. Tariffs are a useful tool if they're used like a scalpel, but that's not how Trump is doing it. He started a trade war, America versus everybody. And so we are going to lose. Our economy will be slowed. Our prices are going up. Our farmers and businesses are going to be able to sell fewer goods to other countries. And China is just now becoming the global economic center because they are not being weighed down by these stupid fucking tariffs with Brazil and the EU, etc. Yeah, it's so fucking stupid. It's so fucking stupid. Angry Long Island Vet says, weren't we supposed to be in a recession now as a result of the tariffs, according to experts? Angry Long Island Vet, the reason why we have not felt the dramatic economic consequences of the tariffs is for two reasons. Number one, a lot of businesses stockpiled goods from overseas in anticipation of the tariffs. So we're still working through that backlog potentially. Number two is that the tariffs are not all hitting at once. They're being delayed and renegotiated and canceled and then put back on. There's no consistency. Businesses don't know what to do. Hiring has slowed significantly. The value of the dollar has plummeted. The American bond market has plummeted. We're going to see the effects of these tariffs either sooner rather than later, slower rather than faster. It's happening. All right, let's see here. Alrighty, scrolling up. Liminal Landscape says, does Vivek become the next governor of Ohio? I sure hope not. That dude's completely full of shit. Excellent live stream today, everybody. Average Joe PG says, "What's your opinion on Josh Johnson's take on how mad Trump was about the South Park episode?" I didn't see that specific take. I actually worked with Josh Johnson a while ago as a stand-up in New York, and I like the guy very much. He is unbelievably committed to his craft. So yeah, I do like Josh. And yeah, I think that it is obvious that Donald Trump was pissed off about that because he's a narcissist and he can't stand it when anybody says anything negative about him, regardless of how silly or accurate it is. Non-consensual learning says, "Have you ever been a part of a different party?" No, I have not. I have only been not involved in politics and then a Democrat. J4 says, "Do politicians pay attention to the bond market as a recession indicator?" I actually don't know about that, J4. I know it's a bad sign. I don't know if politicians markets. There are a bunch of indicators that that politicians can use to see how the economy is doing. I'm just not sure if how high they rate that one, if at all. Monty says the economy that we have right now is due to the Democrats. Monty, I don't know how accurate I would say that statement is because the Trump administration has already done a bunch of things to weaken the dollar and weaken the bond market and slow the economy and slow hiring and increase inflation. If you're talking about the stock market, I think an argument could be made that it is doing very well because of things that happened during the Biden administration. But I mean, we're not really seeing the sort of like delayed effects that we usually see from the economy of the previous administration because Donald Trump has been so active in the economy. And every expert that I have heard talk about, like, why haven't there been more, substantive decays in the markets, is because of just how resilient the American market is and how central we've been globally, and how once that change, and it seems like it is changing, that will, that things will get a lot worse, a lot faster. Talat Burke Senturk says, "I did not target Trump in any video. It was all about Biden. The last three is fake." I don't know who you are. What a weird thing to say. Yeah, I don't know what your deal is, buddy. Talat says, "I am done." All right, well, you provided nothing of substance here. Let's see here. Your funny BFF says, "Who do you think are the top one or two Democratic presidential candidates?" Thank you for being here, your funny BFF. But I always punt on that question because I'm not trying to get people focused on 28. I'm trying to get them focused on 26. We got midterm elections coming up, everybody, and if Democrats don't run the table, we're fucking cooked, man. Monty says, "We are seeing them, and we had felt them for the past 4 years." Again, Monty, I don't know if I agree with what you are saying. Monty says, "I'll come to your live again. You will see." Okay. KL says, "What about universal health care? When will both sides make it possible? Americans truly need this." KL, excellent question. 100% universal health care is better. It's cheaper. It doesn't put roadblocks between people and the care that they need. All of the criticisms of universal health care that people on the right or billionaires try to wedge at it are complete and utter bullshit. That being said, I think it's really important that we be clear-eyed about how difficult changing to universal health care will be, even if we had enough power in government to make it happen. If there's anybody in the government who's against it, or who could be persuaded to be against it, the billionaire class will weaponize them against the process. Even if there wasn't the billionaire class trying to torpedo our switch to universal health care, it's still going to be really hard, and it's going to be a lot of work, and it's going to be expensive. We should do it without question. We should do it. But I just want people to recognize that it's going to be hard, so that when it is hard and when mistakes are made, people don't fucking lose their mind and say, "See, private health insurance was way better than this. This didn't happen under private health insurance," Because I also think that that's another problem that we have in the political discourse, is that we expect these massive changes that the Democratic Party wants to do to be quick and easy. And we ignore the way that Republicans obstruct it and billionaires use their power and money to muck up the works and torpedo the agenda and shit like that. Alrighty, Bud Hannon says, "Name a single thing the government does better than any private company." The post office. There you go. Alrighty, your funny BF says, "What do you think about the FBI redacting Trump and other notable names from the Epstein files?" I haven't heard about them redacting other notable names. I've only heard them about redacting Trump's name. Let's see here. Stephen Gator says the post office is in deb. I think you meant debt, Stephen Gators, but also that's the point of the post office. It's not supposed to turn a profit. It is a public good. And so, yeah, being able to send a letter from California to New York for 50 cents, like, that's amazing. And FedEx does not do that, and UPS does not do that. So, yeah, I'll fucking take the post office, my guy. Alrighty, let's see here. Stephen Gators says, you don't understand profits. No, I do. It's the reason why it is way more expensive to send things via FedEx or UPS, Yeah, there you go, my guy. Paying via taxes is still spying? Yeah, you're out of here, Stephen Gators. Congratulations. You got no face. You got no face on your fucking profile, man. How am I supposed to engage with you sincerely? Jamie says, yeah, they blacked out other names as well who weren't victims. I haven't seen that reporting, Jamie, so I'm not sure if that's accurate. Alphabet Soup says, as Trump approval rating drops each month, do you think this will scare purple states from voting red? No, a lot of voters, the voting bases are generally pretty calcified. And so regardless of how angry they are at their side, they almost always come home when the election rolls around. But we can change that by doing the work. It's not going to happen by itself. But if we are all activated and organized and recruiting people to the cause, we can get people to vote against the Republican Party. But we have to do the work, Nobody else is going to do it besides us. We have to do it. User a bunch of numbers says, is Trump's treatment of the Epstein files an impeachable offense? I think it's a stretch. User a whole bunch of numbers. Because technically it's not in his purview, like it's the DOJ. And he's not supposed to be meddling with the DOJ anyways, If anything, him being on the phone with his attorney general every fucking day and letting Stephen Miller be the shadow attorney general, like those are the impeachable offenses, But Hannon said, I said name something the government does better, and you compared two different things. The post office is the better thing, I'll give you one. Health insurance is better. I was on Medicare. Medicare? I was on Medicaid. When I was poor, I was on Medicaid. And now I'm on private insurance, and private insurance is worse. It fucking sucks. It's more expensive, and my care is worse. Alrighty, there you go, buddy. Bud Hannon says, just lying. Cool, man. Sorry, yeah, I'll tell you the truth, man, but if you're not ready to hear it, there's nothing I can do for you, my guy. Alrighty. All right, everybody, thank you for being here. I'll take some last questions, but I did just want to say before I head out that I really appreciate y'all being here. I really appreciate all the comments and the likes and the shares and the gifts and the questions. So yeah, I just really appreciate it, guys. And I hope that doing this show every day helps. I hope that it's spreading the good information. I hope that it's recruiting people to the fight. Dan Blackwood says, promote your Patreon. I will, Dan Blackwood. Don't you worry. Don't you tell me what to do, Dan Blackwood. Your funny BFF says, I don't recall what it is, but did Texas realign, or what's it called, to remove Democratic seats? Gerrymandering is what you're thinking of, your funny BFF. And they are still trying. The Democrats in Texas are trying a maneuver where they flee the state so that they actually have the correct number of politicians present for a quorum. And they've done it before. I don't know if it's going to eventually be successful, but they're going to try, at least, Alrighty. Let's see here. Sean B says, you're my favorite creator. I appreciate what you're doing. You're on TikTok. Thank you, Susie. Thank you, Sean B. I appreciate that. So yeah, if there were any questions that you guys have that I wasn't able to answer, or that you think of later, don't be shy. Feel free to hit me up. My DMs are open. You can email me through my website. I have a Discord that I think has a lot of great information for people that you can check out. You can also hit me up over there. My project of getting people organized, getting people activated, getting people informed, and unelecting every single fucking Republican from president to dog catcher, that does not stop when this live stream is over. It is a 24/7 project of mine. And so if there are things that I can do to get you on board with that project, that when I'm not streaming and you want to send me an email to get into that shit, like, please do. I encourage it. And yeah, if you want to support the show financially, you can, but you don't have to. I have a Patreon that you can join. You can see it on my website, jaredbernstein.com. And you can buy things from my store. I got some cool things on my store, jaredbernstein.com/store. Or you can send gifts on TikTok and Twitch and YouTube and subscribe and do all the great things, to help support us. Follow and do all that stuff. Yeah, my regular streaming schedule is Monday through Friday, starting around 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. My live streaming schedule and my stand-up schedule can be found on my website, jaredbernstein.com. Currently, I'm on a bit of a stand-up sabbatical, so not a lot of live stand-up shows to see on that schedule. And lastly, just my heartfelt plea for you guys to do the work, because us doing the work is the only way that we get out of this. We're fucked if we don't do the work. And if you want to know what the work is, check out my Discord. There's a thread called The Work, and that's where you find what the work is, everybody. Alrighty, thank you, Average Joe, for being here. As a comedian, what is your opinion about how the Hasan Minhaj Daily Show drama was handled? I was a huge Hasan Minhaj fan, and I got to be honest that some of the tweaks that he made to his life story for dramatic effect, they felt a little beyond the pale to me. They felt a little bit unfair. Where we were going to you for honesty in this moment, and you lied to us. I still think he's incredible. I still think he's really smart and really funny, and I will support him in whatever he does. But that definitely took some wind out of my sails, where I was like, I am a full stan, and now I'm just like, that's a little. I don't love that. But as far as like the Daily Show, like how they handled it, that I'm not 100% sure. I wasn't watching the Daily Show at the time, so I don't really know. I don't really know what their perspective was, or if they removed him as a correspondent, or what. All right, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm gonna get out of here. Have a great weekend. Have some fun, everybody. Be good to each other. Be good to yourselves. Don't forget that self-care is part of the work. And I will see y'all on Monday. Same bad time, same bad channel. Take care, everybody. Bye bye. Goodbye. 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 Goodbye.